To develop optimal health, you must look at the whole picture. Most people I meet have parts of it. Some eat well. Others have their exercise down. Still others have the spiritual component. But you've got to put all of these components together. You've got to integrate body, mind, and spirit into a complete and balanced lifestyle.
Andrew Weil is a graduate of Harvard Medical School, an internationally acclaimed author, and one of the most skilled and important leaders in the field of health and healing.
Dr. Andrew Weil is one of the most effective integrators of alternative medicine with orthodox medicine in our culture today.
He is the best-selling author of numerous books, including Spontaneous Healing, which has been on the New York Times bestseller list ever since its publication. His books have been translated in over 20 languages, and he has a large international following. A graduate of Harvard Medical School, he has traveled widely in North and South America, Africa, and Asia, researching medicinal plants and indigenous medicine for the Institute of Current World Affairs and the Harvard Botanical Museum. He teaches natural healing at the University of Arizona College of Medicine, instructing medical students and interns in the art and science of mind-body interaction, alternative medicine, and medical botany.
I don't think it's a secret to anyone that our current healthcare system is in turmoil. And at a time like this, we need leaders. We need to know who we can trust and who we can't trust.
Andrew Weil is pioneering the transformation of medicine. He's an expert in bringing together holistic, complementary, and alternative therapies.
This man is not given to extremism as so many proponents of so-called holistic medicine are. So he doesn't ask you to abandon orthodox medicine. He asks you to use it in an integrated way with other forms of therapy. So he would advise you to do other things as well to increase your rate of healing.
Andrew Weil lives with his family just outside of Tucson, where he cultivates organic vegetables, writes, and oversees the Center for Integrative Medicine, which advances healing-oriented medicine around the world. His internet site, Ask Dr. Weil, is one of the most popular websites and is visited by millions of people the world over. And now, Dr. Andrew Weil in 8 Weeks to Optimum Health.
Thank you. Hello. I've designed an 8-week program for optimal health based on my experiences as a practitioner of natural and preventive medicine. I want to tell you about that program and encourage you to follow it. But before I do that, I'd like to summarize for you my philosophy of health and healing in medicine. I think health is much more than the absence of disease. It's a positive attribute. And the essential quality of it is balance. It's a kind of inner resilience that allows you to move through the world and not get knocked down by all the things out there that have the potential to make you sick. It's a kind of inner springiness or bounciness. And if you have that quality, you can interact with germs and not get infections. You can interact with allergens and not have allergic reactions. You can interact with carcinogens and not get cancer. And that quality of resilience can be developed. It's something that you can work on. You can enhance it. It's your greatest ally in going through life. And the purpose of this program is to protect that quality and to develop it. Whenever the body gets knocked out of balance, there is a tendency for it to come back, and that's what healing is. Healing is the natural tendency for balance to be restored whenever it's lost. And I think that's not only a perfectly natural tendency, I think it's also something that's universal. You can see it in all organisms, and maybe even in things that we consider non-living. I remember years ago, when I was in college, I interviewed a scientist who was an expert on rivers. And this was at a time long before ecology and environmental science was fashionable. And he said something to me that I always remembered, I found very interesting. He said that rivers are living systems, and they have many mechanisms for keeping themselves pure and clean that include sunlight that reaches into deeper layers of water, oxygen that mixes with water in turbulent areas, various kinds of microorganisms that live in rivers, the plants that live in rivers. And he said that you can dump a certain amount of sludge and waste into a river, and it can handle it, it can process it, because these mechanisms of purification are operating. But that if you exceed some critical level, you begin to poison these natural systems of purification, and a river begins to die. And one by one, these mechanisms are put out of action, and eventually the river becomes polluted and dead. But, and this was what caught my attention, he said that if you simply stop putting the pollution into the river, gradually levels will drop to a point where those natural systems begin to revive, and gradually the river will begin to clean itself up. And when I was in medical school, long after that, I thought, why shouldn't that apply to systems in the body? For instance, to arteries, which in some ways are like rivers. We can dump things into arteries that act like sludge, and eventually narrow arteries and slow down the flow of them. When I was in medical school, I was taught that atherosclerosis was irreversible, that once you had that, that was it. You were stuck with it. Turns out that's not true. We now know that by reducing cholesterol, reducing saturated fat in the diet, exercising, practicing relaxation techniques, one can actually reverse atherosclerosis. That is, the body has mechanisms of removing those deposits from arteries, and blood flow increases, including in vital areas like the brain and the heart. And I think that old view that atherosclerosis is irreversible really reflects a very common attitude in conventional medicine that's extremely pessimistic about healing. And I'm really trying to put out there a new view that focuses on the body's potential for healing. I think we all are born with a healing system. I think this is a function of the human body. Everyone has it. It's there working for you all the time. One thing that the healing system can do is to produce very dramatic recoveries from illness. That's something that I've reported on in my writings. But I think an even more important function of the healing system is keeping us in relatively good health from day to day, which is nothing short of a miraculous considering all the things that can go wrong. If you think about everything that could go wrong, it's just amazing that we make it from one day to the next in states of health, and yet most of us are mostly healthy most of the time. That's the main job of the healing system. It really is there to keep you in states of good health. It's about prevention. And that is your greatest ally in moving through life. So the purpose of this program that I'm going to describe to you is to protect that healing system, to keep it there ready to work for you, and actually to enhance its function as well. There are many things that you can do that involve choices about how you live that can affect the functioning of the healing system. Now, I also want to make a distinction between healing and treatment. First of all, I'm going to ask you a question. If the body is so good at healing, if we have all these potentials, why do we get sick? And I think a short answer to that question is that at any given time, the healing system can be overwhelmed by the forces of illness. It can be unable to deal with it, just like the river that has too much sludge in it and its mechanisms are not functioning. So also healing can be blocked or it can be stalled. And I'll give you an example of this. When you cut yourself, that's a very good opportunity to observe the healing system at work. But there are some circumstances in which cuts don't heal. One is if they get infected. That blocks healing. Another is if you have a foreign body in a wound. If you have a stone in a wound, the wound is not going to heal. Another possibility is that if a person doesn't have enough metabolic energy for healing, say somebody that's got hypothyroidism, wounds heal slowly. Or if you look at a person with diabetes where blood circulation is often compromised because arteries have been narrowed, the body can't get enough nourishment and healing energy to the site of a wound, and a wound won't heal. So those are all examples of how healing can be blocked, and that possibility creates the need for treatment. I think that ideally treatment should facilitate healing, it should support healing. And I regret very much that in this century, medicine has moved away from the idea of supporting natural healing toward more and more drastic intervention. Many doctors and many patients believe that when you're sick, you need something from outside to do it for you. That's not what you need. You need to have your healing function supported. And the best treatments are those that are the least expensive, the least invasive, the least damaging, that support the body's healing function. The kind of medicine that I practice, I call integrative medicine. And this is a term that I'm trying to popularize. By integrative medicine, I mean medicine that combines the best of all worlds, that looks at all possible therapies that are out there and prioritizes those that are most cost effective, that work from the premise that the body can heal itself if given a chance, and that take account of the whole person. I think we're much more than physical bodies. We're also mental beings and spiritual beings, and often the causes of illness arise on those levels. You know, I must say that as a practitioner, I'm more and more convinced that stress is the primary cause or the aggravating cause of the majority of illness, the majority of reasons that people consult physicians. And if that isn't taken into account, you're very limited in your therapeutic options. A great deal of conventional medicine simply focuses on the physical body. That's not enough. And I also want to make a distinction between treatment and prevention, because I feel very strongly that the main function of medicine should be to prevent illness. Now, the word doctor comes from the Latin word for teacher. And I think the main function of doctors should be to teach people how not to get sick in the first place. You know, how to live in accordance with natural principles that reduce risks of illness. We really have a great deal of information now about how lifestyle choices affect your state of health and your risks of illness. And that should be what doctors convey to patients. But the education of doctors doesn't really prepare them to do that. I learned very little about practical prevention in my medical training. At the moment, I'm director of a new program at the University of Arizona College of Medicine called the Program in Integrative Medicine. And this is the first of its kind in the country. And I feel quite confident that once one medical school breaks the ice in this way, that many others are going to follow suit, because this is what people want. And my purpose is to train a new kind of physician for the future. Doctors who know how to combine the best principles and ideas and practices of all systems of therapy out there, who work from the premise that the body can heal itself, that we have this healing system, and that take account of all aspects of human beings, the physical as well as the emotional and spiritual. And integrative medicine does not reject conventional medicine. It's obvious that conventional medicine has its place. If I were in a serious automobile accident, I would not want to be first taken to a chiropractor or a shaman or an herbalist. I'd like to go to a trauma center at a major medical institution, and when I got patched back together, I might use some of these other modalities that I know about to speed up the healing process. If I had an acute bacterial pneumonia, I'd want to be treated with penicillin. I mean, that's obvious. Conventional medicine in general is very good at managing crises and emergencies and very severe and fast-moving conditions. But for many other kinds of illnesses, there are much better options out there in the world of what at the moment is called alternative medicine. And I think all this has to be brought together. So that's the vision I have of integrative medicine. And I also want to introduce you to another term that I like, lifestyle medicine. And I think the word lifestyle needs to be cleaned up a little bit, because I'm not talking about yachts and golf courses and California living. I'm talking about the choices people make about how they eat, how they exercise, how they handle stress, how they use their minds, the kinds of relationships that they form. I mean, all these things are elements of lifestyle, and I think they're very relevant to practical prevention and supporting the healing system. When I interview patients, I question them very carefully about their lifestyles. Some people say they've never had a doctor ask them so many questions, and I get very nosy. I ask about what people do for fun. I ask about their sex lives. I ask about their relationship with work. I'm very curious about their choices of beverages, whether they drink caffeine and alcohol, their habits. You know, all these things are quite relevant to people's health, and that has to be taken into account with family history, with age, with disease risks, and so forth, in order to give practical recommendations to people. I must say also that I'm very disappointed as I look around at books, practitioners, theories of health, that so few people seem to get the whole picture. Everyone seems to have parts of it down. Some people really have diet down. You know, they understand that it is good to reduce animal foods in the diet, to eat low fat, and so forth. Some people are very good about exercise. You know, they really understand that our bodies are made to be used, that we're supposed to be doing things with it, and that people who exercise regularly are much healthier as they age. Other people have the spiritual component of health down, but seem to neglect the physical. But I just noticed that there's always something missing, and I think you've really got to have the whole picture. I can give you lots of examples of this. I recently had dinner with a physician who runs a very well-known residential treatment center to extend longevity, and they have very good success there at reversing a number of chronic diseases, especially cardiovascular diseases. And the emphasis is on extremely low-fat food, exercise, some attention to stress reduction, but not very much. And a few days before I had this dinner, there was an article that appeared in the AMA journal that was reported in the press, in which a team of researchers concluded that emotional factors were much more important than previously thought in heart attack risk, and that these might even overshadow dietary factors. And I must say I was being a little provocative here, because I mentioned this article to this physician, and his instant response, he hadn't even read it, was, "What a bunch of baloney." Now, and I kind of knew he'd react that way. But that's an example of what I mean about not getting the whole picture. I mean, it's not just about low fat. You've got to look at all these other things as well. As another example, I stayed recently at a health spa which had very heavy emphasis on exercise, and sort of forced marches in the morning, and also extremely low fat, purely vegetarian food. And the physician who was head of this center said in his lectures that foods like eggs and cheese and other milk products were poisons. There was great emphasis that all these things were poisons. Meantime, the maintenance crew every day was out there spraying pesticides on the lawn, and you couldn't walk along the paths without getting the fumes of these things. And they didn't get the importance of organic produce at all. It just didn't compute with them. That's another example of what I mean about not getting the whole picture. In the 8-week program that I'm going to describe to you, it's all there. I mean, this is about what you can do on the physical level, what you can do on the mental, emotional level, what you can do on the spiritual level. And I think you've got to remember to work in all those areas. Now, next thing I want to talk to you is about the process of change, how people change, and how they are able to make major changes in lifestyle, because that's often not very easy. You know, there is a principle of inertia in human life. It's very easy to keep going in the course that you're going, and it takes effort to change. What allows people to change? Now, obviously, one great motivator is fear. Now, I have seen many people be very willing to drop lifelong habits of poor eating, smoking, and so forth, when they suddenly discover that their cholesterol is over 300, and they realize that they're at the same age that they were when their father died of a heart attack. I have seen women who have had a great scare about a lump in a breast, for example, who've suddenly looked at issues in their lives of what they're eating and how they're using their minds and so forth that might be relevant to the development of breast cancer. So I'm not disputing this. I think fear is a very powerful motivator, and it's one that people commonly use to enable themselves to change lifestyle. But I think there are advantages to not being dependent on a negative motivator. For one thing, if fear recedes, so does motivation. You know, as soon as the immediate fear disappears, it's very easy to go right back to the old habits. I think it's much better to have a positive reason for making changes, such as feeling more energy, for example, or looking more like the way you want to look. I mean, those are examples of positive things that I think can sustain behavior change. And I know this from my own experience, because for much of my early life, I led, I think, a fairly unhealthy lifestyle. I should say here at the moment that I think it's too bad that young bodies are so forgiving, because you don't notice, you don't see the effects of unhealthy living in your 20s and 30s, and suddenly when you get in your 40s, and especially as you approach 50, you know, suddenly it becomes obvious that what you've been doing, that there's a price to pay for that. How much better it would be if you got immediate feedback at younger ages so that you could begin adopting healthier ways of living earlier. But I know from my own experience, when I was about 28, I was extremely sedentary. I hated exercise. I was very unconscious in my food choices. At that time, I had a lot of musculoskeletal aches and pains. I had allergies very frequently, hay fever. I would get hives. I couldn't go out in the sun because I'd always get burned and never tan. I mean, I was not very fit. And I knew that I wanted to go off around the world and study healing practices in other culture, and I especially wanted to go to South America because my botanical studies at Harvard had gotten me very interested in South American Indians. I wanted to learn about their plants and shamanistic practices. So I planned out a very extensive set of travels that were going to be very arduous, and I knew I was in no condition to undertake those. So that desire to make that trip, to do that, which was a trip that lasted a number of years, was the motivator that got me to begin changing my diet, to begin doing yoga, to begin learning how to stay outdoors, to be comfortable with my body. And I experienced enormous changes in my physical being and my mental and spiritual being as well, and those changes have lasted. And I think that one reason that they lasted was that they were sustained by a positive reason for change. So again, I don't deny the immediate efficacy of fear as a motivator, but I think it is good also to have positive reasons for making lifestyle change. I also want to say that I think it's good if you make changes gradually. You know, if you make changes too suddenly and too drastically, there's also a tendency to bounce back and go in the other direction. Whereas if you make changes gradually, you put small steps in place, it's easier to move. And I have seen people make tremendous changes in how they live, starting with relatively small steps. So the way that I've designed this 8-week program is to give you small steps, and each week by week you build on the steps of the previous week, until by the end you have really put some major changes in place. And I'd also like to say that I think the earlier in life you can do this, the better. And I think it's vital to try to communicate this information to children. You know, there are a number of advantages to this. The first is that the earlier in life you start to do this, the longer the period of time that you get to enjoy the benefits of living this way. And also I think it's easier to adopt changes earlier. You know, it's not very easy at the age of 50 suddenly to make a radical shift in your diet unless you're very scared by something. The difficulties of trying to do this with kids is that, first of all, you can't use fear, and I think this is a basic mistake that adults often make. You know, it doesn't work to try to scare kids away from smoking by showing them pictures of cancerous lungs. You know, those are distant events that have no meaning for children, and yet this is often what adults try to do. And the other problem you're up against is that children are exposed to so much commercial pressure to live in unhealthy ways, especially in the area of diet, as you all know. But nonetheless, I think this is a crucial task that all of us face. And one way that you can do this, I mean, children after all are our future, is by doing it yourself. You know, I think if parents adopt healthy lifestyles, that you can model healthy living for kids. And without being heavy-handed about it and trying to push them in certain directions, you know, they will naturally tend to absorb that and imitate that behavior. And I think that would be terrific. And let me tell you why I've chosen 8 weeks for this program. In my medical practice, you know, I've worked with many patients who have had chronic conditions. And as I've told you, I practice natural medicine. So often the methods that I use are dietary change, use of vitamins and mineral supplements, use of herbs, particularly because my background is as a botanist, mind-body techniques. And I note that very frequently the benefits that come from making these changes come after about 2 months. And often I have to tell people who are used especially to the immediate effects of pharmaceutical treatment that they have to be a little patient with natural therapies. And I'll give you an example of what I mean. Some of the most commonly prescribed drugs in our society are anti-inflammatory drugs, especially the non-steroidal anti-inflammatories. Now, these are very powerful drugs. They work. They come at a great price. The price is that they're extremely rough on the stomach. And there are thousands of deaths each year from stomach hemorrhages in people taking these non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, often for relatively trivial conditions. Now, that's an example of what's wrong with a lot of our choices in modern drug treatment. These drugs work on a system of hormones in the body called prostaglandins that mediate inflammation and pain. Prostaglandins are synthesized from fatty acids in the body. You can affect the prostaglandin system by the choices of dietary fats that you make. Some fats promote the synthesis of prostaglandins that increase inflammation. Some fats support the synthesis of prostaglandins that suppress inflammation. So that's a way, it gives you a way of manipulating that system. There also are a number of herbs with anti-inflammatory effect. 2 common ones are ginger and turmeric, the yellow spice that's in mustard and curry. They also work on the prostaglandin system. But when you institute those changes, instead of immediately suppressing the inflammatory prostaglandins, what you're doing is affecting gradually the synthesis of these hormones. So it takes time to see the effect. If you're used to getting an effect from an anti-inflammatory drug within hours, you're going to be very disappointed when you go on a regimen of natural medicine for dealing with arthritis or bursitis or some other inflammatory condition. But if you're patient, if you wait somewhere between 6 and 8 weeks, you begin to see the changes happen. So this is just something that I noticed from my own experience, that somewhere about 2 months, this is an adequate trial. So that's why I've designed this way. So I'm going to lay out this program for you. And if you will institute the steps in the 8-week program, by the time you get to the end of it, you will have laid the foundations for a healthy lifestyle, one that will protect and enhance your body's ability to heal itself.
Next, the 8-week program, when we return with Dr. Andrew Wong.
I want to give you the tools I have found for changing your life, an 8-week program for improving health and accessing the power of spontaneous healing in your body. I will guide you step by step through this program, giving you advice about how to eat, how to exercise, how to breathe, how to use your mind, how to handle stress, how to use vitamins, minerals, and herbal supplements to protect your body's healing system, and how to change long-standing patterns of behavior that might impair optimal health. Okay, welcome to the 8-week program. This is week 1. Now, the way I've organized the information is that I've divided it into categories. And the categories are that each week I'm going to ask you to do a project of some sort, which may involve doing a little homework. I'm going to ask you to make some changes in your diet. I'm going to give you some recommendations for supplements that I'd like you to take. And I am going to give you advice about exercise. And finally, I'm going to give you some very interesting things to do in the realm of mental, emotional, spiritual health. So your project for week 1 is to go through your pantry and your refrigerator and throw out unhealthy things. And the first category of unhealthy things that I'm going to talk about is fats and oils, because we now have a tremendous amount of information about how different kinds of fats affect health. So I'd like you to throw away all polyunsaturated vegetable oils. That's sunflower, safflower, corn, sesame, those kinds of things, which a previous generation of doctors told us were very healthy for our hearts. But these oils, in fact, are chemically unstable. They react with oxygen too quickly, especially if they stand around or are heated, and the products of those oxidation reactions are very dangerous. They cause mutations in DNA, they cause cancer, they promote inflammation. You don't want to eat these things, so get rid of them. Secondly, I want you to become aware of saturated fat in your diet. Saturated fat are the animal fats, mostly, which are solid at room temperature. You want to keep saturated fat in your diet as low as possible. The lower you can get saturated fat in your diet, the lower your risk of heart disease. That simple. There are some other very unhealthy categories of fats, especially artificially hardened fats. That's margarine, solid vegetable shortenings, and all products that say on the label that they're made with partially hydrogenated vegetable oil of any kind, and that is virtually all baked goods at the moment. You cannot buy cookies, crackers, candies that don't contain partially hydrogenated fats. I think these are extremely dangerous. They promote heart disease, and they contain unnatural fatty acids called trans fatty acids that are very suspect also of damaging cell membranes, of deranging basic elements of the body's healing system. And I'll predict to you that in the next few years, we're going to see more and more medical research documenting the hazards of these fats. So read labels and throw out anything that contains partially hydrogenated oils of any kind. The safest fat to eat is olive oil. Now, olive oil tastes good. The populations that use it as their main cooking oil have low rates of both heart disease and cancer. The main fatty acid in olive oil, called oleic acid, seems to be the one that the body can handle best. It can process it best, and it may not affect cholesterol levels as much as other fatty acids. I would recommend getting extra virgin olive oil and keep it in the refrigerator, even though that's a little bit of a pain because it will harden and you'll have to let it liquefy to use it. But the colder you keep oils, you reduce the oxidative change that occurs in them. Now, I'll give you one caution about olive oil. Worldwide demand for olive oil has increased enormously in the past few years as more and more people have learned about its health benefits. And in response to that, a great many adulterated and impure brands of olive oil have appeared on the market. And I'm sorry to tell you that in recent government tests, only a tiny minority of brands of olive oil tested pure, whether they said pure on the label or not. So you want to let your eyes and nose be a guide here. Good olive oil should be green or greenish yellow and should have a very pronounced fruity aroma and flavor. So if you get extra virgin olive oil that looks that way and that tastes that way and smells that way, you're okay. I recommend using olive oil as your main cooking fat. If you want a neutral oil that doesn't have a flavor, you can try canola oil. But I think that's a distant runner-up to olive oil. And if you use canola oil, be sure to get only a health food store brand that says that it is expeller pressed and organic, and use it in small amounts. Now, there's some other things in the pantry that I want you to get rid of. I want you to get rid of anything that's got artificial sweeteners in it. There is no evidence that anyone has lost any weight from using artificial sweeteners in place of sugar. And there is very good reason to suspect that artificial sweeteners are biological hazards. A number of people react to them. A number of people get headaches. Women get changes in menstrual cycles. I'm suspicious of these as a group, and I recommend getting rid of them. I also strongly recommend not eating foods that contain artificial colors of any kind. If the label says that it contains F, D, and C, red number this, or green number this, or just says color added or artificial color added, throw it out. Dyes are, again, highly suspect chemicals that probably interact with DNA, that can promote mutation, malignant transformation. They're not good to have in your diet. Okay, that's your project. For diet this week, two simple things that I'd like you to eat if you don't already do so. The first is broccoli. And broccoli is symbolic of adding more fresh vegetables to your diet, but of all the vegetables out there, broccoli seems to be the one that has the greatest cancer protective effect. You know, fruits and vegetables in general have many protective factors in them, so you want to increase the number and variety of fruits and vegetables that you eat, fresh fruits and vegetables. But broccoli is a good one. If you don't like it, find ways to cook it. I've had a lot of horrible broccoli in my life that's been overcooked. If it's cooked very briefly to the point of being bright green and very crunchy tender, you can make delicious preparations of broccoli. And I've had a lot of people who said they never liked broccoli suddenly discover that it's a good thing to eat. One of the compounds in broccoli that's been identified as a major cancer fighter is called sulforaphane. And recently I saw in a health food store capsules of sulforaphane in a bottle that had a picture of broccoli on it, and this was represented as being broccoli in a pill. I think this is a pitfall that we fall into in the West, and it's called reductionism. It's thinking that the part is equal to the whole. Even though we have identified sulforaphane as a cancer-fighting element in broccoli, that does not mean that it reproduces the effects of eating whole broccoli. I would not want to take broccoli in a pill. I would like to eat broccoli, and I recommend that to you too. The other dietary addition that I'd like to make, if you don't already do so, is to eat some salmon. If you don't want to eat salmon, eat sardines. These are sources of omega-3 fatty acids, which are rare, unusual fatty acids that seem to have a whole range of health benefits. They reduce the clotting tendency of the blood and so protect against heart attacks and stroke. They reduce inflammation and so are very useful as treatments for anyone with autoimmune conditions or inflammatory conditions, and they're hard to get in the diet. The two best sources that I know of in the fish world are salmon, and I should say here that wild salmon has significantly more of these omega-3s than farmed salmon. So I think wild Alaskan salmon or wild Atlantic salmon are good choices, and you can find ways to grill it or broil it without additional fat or poach it, and it's a very good food. If you don't like sardines, many people don't, eat salmon. If you don't want to eat fish, you have an alternative. The alternative is flax seeds. Flax seeds are also a good source of omega-3 fatty acids. They're very cheap. You can buy them in health food stores in bulk, keep them in the refrigerator, grind them in a coffee grinder or blender in small amounts, keep it in the refrigerator, and sprinkle a tablespoon of flax meal over salads or cereal, or add it to baked goods or on baked potatoes. A tablespoon a day of flax meal will give you a very healthy dose of omega-3 fatty acids. It tastes nutty and sweet. It may have a laxative effect, which most people like, but be aware of that. Okay, for supplements this week, I recommend taking vitamin C, and the doses that I recommend of vitamin C are substantial. I recommend taking 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams, that's 1 to 2 grams of vitamin C at least twice a day, and if you can remember to do it 3 times a day. So that's anywhere between 3,000 and 6,000 milligrams of vitamin C a day. Vitamin C is harmless. It has no toxicity, except that above some dose you'll begin to get flatulence, and if you keep going up you'll get diarrhea. That's called the level of bowel tolerance, and you want to stay below that. The doses that I recommend shouldn't do that to you. Vitamin C is a powerful antioxidant, and it's the first element of an antioxidant formula that you're going to be using throughout this 8-week program. So that's the first one to take. Exercise for this week. I'm going to tell you that my favorite exercise is walking, and I've tried many forms of it, and I've done a lot of research on exercise. The reasons I like walking are, first, everyone knows how to do it. You don't have to take any classes in it. It is the form of exercise that carries the least risk of injury, by far. You can do it anywhere. It will last you all your life. It's something that you can do as you age into old age. Some of the healthiest old people that I've met are people who walk every day. It's fun. It takes you to nice places. The only requirement that you need, the only piece of equipment you need, is a good pair of shoes. Now, I recommend running shoes for serious walking, but whatever suits you and is comfortable. And walking offers some advantages that other forms of exercise don't. It is a good neurological workout. When you walk, this pattern of moving the opposite arm and leg sets up coordinated rhythms in the brain that are very healthy. I mean, this is the way that babies learn to crawl, by doing this kind of opposite movement, and that stimulates brain development. Other forms of exercise don't necessarily do that for you. And one of the objections to walking that I hear from serious exercisers is that it's too tame. You know, people think you need to do something much more intense to get the benefits of exercise. Not so. I have seen people lose tremendous amounts of weight just by doing serious walking. So throughout this program, I'm going to recommend increasing amounts of walking. But for the first week, I would just like you to try walking 10 minutes, 5 days a week. Walking can perfectly satisfy your aerobic requirement. If it doesn't get your heart rate and breathing up fast enough, what you want to do is walk uphill or walk faster until you can feel your heart rate and breathing increase. And if you're doing other forms of exercise at the moment, I still recommend doing this 10-minute walk 5 days a week this first week, and I'm going to ask you eventually to replace some of your other aerobic exercise. And for your mental spiritual task this week, I want you to do 5 minutes a day of breath observation. Nothing simpler. I just want you to sit or lie when you're waking up, falling asleep, or anywhere that's convenient, and for 5 minutes do nothing other than follow your breath with your attention. If you're seated, sit comfortably with your back straight, close your eyes lightly, and just watch your breath. Don't do anything else. Breath is a very powerful focus for attention. When you have your attention on your breath, I think your mind is in neutral. It's a very safe place to have your attention, much safer than a lot of places that we often put our attention, like our thoughts, for example. You know, thoughts are often the source of a great deal of grief and anxiety and unhappiness. Breath is a safe place to focus. So I want you today just to begin this, and this is really the most basic meditative technique, is just to focus on the breath. So it's an easy thing to do. So that takes you to the end of week 1. So let's move on to week 2 of the program. Your project for this week is to find out about your drinking water, where it comes from and what impurities it might contain. I am very concerned about effects of environmental toxins on the healing system. I think that our total exposure, cumulative exposure to toxins over time is a major reason for reduction of immunity, for the increase of cancer in the world, for the rise of chronic viral infections, and I think this is something that we really need to pay attention to. Some kinds of toxins you can do more about than others. One that you certainly can do something about is the water you drink. In order to do this right, you really got to get your water tested, or you've got to get test results from your water supplier and find out what kinds of impurities it might contain, because if you don't do that, you won't know what kind of a system you need to purify it. Bottled water is not very cost effective over time, and there are questions about the purity of bottled water as well. There are many good water purifying systems out there. For example, one of the best technologies at the moment is called KDF, which is a copper zinc alloy. You can get a dual cartridge system that has a carbon block in one chamber and this KDF alloy in another. It will remove most of your impurities. But this is a project for you this week to find out about this. For your diet, I want you to eat fish at least once a week, or flax if you don't eat fish. And I want you to investigate soy products, and that means going to a health food store and looking through the refrigerator and freezers to find out what kinds of soy products are out there. There's everything. There's hot dogs, hamburgers, lunch meats, I mean, all sorts of things made from soy. Soybeans have remarkable protective effects, and in particular, they seem to have enormously protective effects for women against breast cancer, and probably for men against prostate cancer. And this is a result of compounds called isoflavones that they contain that are unique to soybeans that block access to estrogen receptors by a number of environmental toxins that may be pressures on women in the direction of breast cancer. So you want to find out what kinds of soybean products are there that you like. I mean, there's some yucky soybean products out there as well, so you've got to try things. But I'd like you at least, just to get familiar with what's out there. And another one that I'd like you to investigate is Japanese green tea, especially if you are a drinker of coffee. Because of all the caffeine beverages, green tea, it seems to be the one that is most associated with health benefits. It lowers cholesterol, it reduces cancer risks, it has very powerful effects on the body's healing system. So I strongly recommend checking it out, especially if you're a user of other forms of caffeine beverages. Your supplement for this week is to add carotenes. I recommend a mixed carotene supplement that contains at least 25,000 international units of beta-carotene. Make sure it contains something called lycopene, which is the red pigment in tomatoes that's been found recently to be a powerful protector against prostate cancer in men. Very useful to know about. So you'll take one of these capsules a day. You could take it with breakfast. For exercise, I want you to increase your walking a bit. Let's do 15 minutes a day this week. And for your mental, spiritual task, here's a good one. I want you to take a news fast for a day. I want you to go through a day without letting news into your consciousness, whether from radio, television, or newspapers. And the reasons for this should be obvious. I find, in my experience, that news is a major source of unhealthy mental states. It makes people angry, it makes them feel powerless, outraged, and what worries me especially is that some people seem to get addicted to that feeling of outrage and anger, and I think it's a major reason for listening to news. So this is an interesting exercise. Try not letting any news into your consciousness next week. I want you here to focus on another major category of toxins in the diet, in food. I want you to find out where you can get organic produce. I am a major proponent of organic agriculture. I think that the growth of the organic agriculture movement in this country is a wonderful thing. People said it couldn't happen. They said that you couldn't do it on a commercial scale. Turns out when there's a market out there, you can do it. Now, it's not easy in all parts of the country to get organic foods of good quality. So I think you need to be aware of what crops are most likely to be contaminated. So those you can either avoid or make a special effort to get organic versions of them. At this time, the tests that I've seen make these crops look most dangerous. Strawberries are at the top of the list. Peaches, spinach, cherries grown in the United States, apricots, cantaloupes from Mexico, which are the ones that come in the winter, celery, apples, grapes from Chile, also ones that come in the winter, bell peppers, green and red, green beans, cucumbers. And I would also add to this one that often doesn't show up in the list, which is wheat. And products made from wheat flour. So in these areas, and I'd say soybeans also if you're going to eat soy foods, but in these areas I think it's very important either not to eat these foods, not to eat them frequently or in quantity, or to really make an effort to get organic versions. So you've got to do a little homework here to find out about that. And I also strongly recommend supporting organic growers as much as possible. This is a great movement that's been happening in our country and something that's very important. I also want to talk about another source of toxicity in the environment, which is more controversial, and that is electromagnetic pollution. This is something that the medical profession has been slow to recognize the dangers of, but I would predict to you that we're going to learn more and more about it. I mean, there's some obvious ones, like not living under power lines or in the path of a microwave transmitter, but there are also less obvious ones. There are many household appliances that generate large electromagnetic fields that are suspect of deranging the body's healing system. And I'll just mention a few that I'm concerned about. Electric blankets, I think you should get rid of. When you run wires and coils this way and have them right next to your body, for long periods of time, I think that's dangerous. Electric heating pads as well. Another one is electric clock radios, the plug-in kind, not the battery-operated kind. It's not good to have these right near your head when you're sleeping. Another one is hair dryers that plug in, the blow dryers, also suspect, and you're using them near your head. And then the most important thing to remember about electromagnetic pollution is that the danger falls off exponentially as distance increases between you and the source. So your greatest protection is to move away from the sources of anything that generate electromagnetic fields. For your dietary change this week, please eat more fruit and vegetables. Just try to keep adding that. I would like you to eat fish twice a week if you can do that, and experiment with recipes or increase your flax a little bit. And see if you could replace one meal of meat with soy foods. That would be a terrific change. I think if Americans could learn to substitute soy protein for some of the animal protein in their diet, that would be one of the single healthiest changes that they could make. For your supplements, I'd like you to add to the antioxidant formula two things that will complete it. Vitamin E, it should be a natural form of vitamin E, not synthetic, and the label will say that. You want D-alpha tocopherol, not DL-alpha tocopherol. And you want to take 400 units if you're under 40, 800 units if you're over 40. And I'd like you to take that with 200 micrograms of selenium. The two work together. And that completes your antioxidant formula. Increase your walking this week to 25 minutes a day. And for your mental spiritual project, I'd like you to think about people in your life who raise your spirits. The people you are around who make you feel happier, better, make a list of those people and seek them out. And I'd like you to buy some flowers and keep them in your space, because I think being around flowers naturally raises spirits and makes you feel better. Okay, week 4. I want you to make sure you're getting good rest and sleep, and I want you to look at common problems that interfere with sleep, such as having not a good mattress, a noisy environment, anything that might be disturbing your rest and sleep. For a dietary change this week, I'd like you to start eating more garlic. Garlic is a superior tonic. It works for the cardiovascular system. It's a powerful antibiotic, has anti-cancer effects. It's great. For exercise, let's increase your walking to 25 minutes a day this week and do that 5 days a week. And I'd like you to begin experimenting with stretching. Stretching is a totally natural activity, and you can learn a lot about it from watching dogs and cats do it. They look, by the way, like they have a very good time when they do it. Dogs emit wonderful sounds of pleasure when they stretch. And the basic principle here is very simple. Whenever your body is in one position for a long time, stretch it in the opposite direction. I mean, that's a basic, simple principle. Muscles have stretch receptors in them that give immediate feedback to the brain, and stretching seems to be a powerful way of changing the way we feel, our body perception and our level of arousal and emotional states. Very useful, and I think stretching and walking together are a terrific combination. And for the mental spiritual activities this week, I want you to take a 2-day news fast instead of a 1-day news fast, and see if you can do that. I want you to continue doing your breath observation, and do that just 5 minutes a day, every day if you can, whenever it's convenient. Just watch your breath, follow the rising and falling of the breath. As I told you, I'm a great believer in breath as a master key to good health. And next, I'm going to give you a very powerful relaxation technique that's based on a simple breathing method that you're going to practice for the rest of the 8-week program, and I hope for the rest of your life.
Next, the conclusion of the 8-week program. when we return with Dr. Andrew Weil.
Most people go through life in a state of perpetual confrontation, always trying to impose their will on the flow of events. But according to Lao Tzu, the ancient Chinese philosopher, that attitude is opposed to the way of life, and people who cling to it are doomed. Acceptance, resignation, submission, whatever you call it, that mental shift might be a master key that unlocks spontaneous healing. Resignation does not mean giving up. It means allowing healing to happen. We've arrived at week 5 of the 8-week program. Your project for this week is to locate a steam bath or sauna and spend 20 minutes in it 1 day a week. I'm a great believer in sweating. This is a way of helping the healing system. You know, one aspect of the healing system is the purifying aspect, just like the rivers that I told you about. The kidneys and circulating blood are involved with this. It's a powerful way of ridding toxins. One way you can help this system is by sweating, and the only caution here is to make sure that you replace the fluid that you lose. So you want to drink quantities of pure water. But if you can do this 1 day a week, your liver will be happier, your blood will be happier, your kidneys will be happier. It's a very healthy thing to do. A dietary addition to make this week is to eat some ginger. Ginger is a very powerful healing herb. It has powerful anti-inflammatory effects. It also is very good for the digestive system and stomach. It may have anti-cancer properties as well. Any form of ginger you want to use is fine with me. You can make ginger tea from fresh ginger root and sweeten it if you want. You can eat crystallized ginger, which is something that I like very much. You can use ginger in cooking. It's a useful thing to add to the diet. So experiment with it. Find out about different forms of ginger and see how you like to use it. For exercise, let's increase your walk to 30 minutes this week. So I'm taking you up gradually here towards your eventual goal. And I want you to be sure to remember to stretch, you know, especially if you get up from a sitting position, or even take a few minutes before you go to bed to do some stretches on the floor. You know, it doesn't have to be a complicated program. If you want to do formal stretching, yoga, that's fine. But you can also do very informal stretching that takes little time that will give you the benefits of that way of using your body. And for mental spiritual activities this week, one simple one is I'd like you to go to a park or someplace in nature that you like and just spend as much time as you can there. I think it is very important to connect with nature. If you live in a city, you can do this just by going to a park. And there's so many benefits here. One is that being around trees is very healthy because trees are great air purifiers, and this is one way of dealing with polluted air in cities. If you seek out a park, you're going to be breathing better air, and you can thank the trees for doing that. But the other thing that I want you to work on this week is to begin practicing this relaxing breath. This is a yoga technique. It's thousands of years old. I teach it to all my patients. I've seen spectacular results. It lowers blood pressure immediately, slows heart rate, and done over time harmonizes the function of the involuntary nervous system and will correct many kinds of illnesses, digestive disturbances, circulatory disturbances, and as well, it's a very effective way to control emotional states, to reduce anxiety, eventually also to deal with habits that you don't want. So I'm going to demonstrate this technique for you. I'm going to describe it, I'll demonstrate it, and then we'll do it together. In yoga breathing exercises, you often keep your tongue in what's called the yogic position, which is just behind and above your upper front teeth, so like that. And you just keep that connection made there. So in this exercise, you're going to breathe out through your mouth, making a sound. And you're going to breathe in through your nose quietly. So the directions for this is you let all the air out of your lungs. You inhale through your nose to a count of 4. Hold your breath for a count of 7, and exhale for a count of 8. So exhalation is the longest phase, and you're going to do 4 breath cycles like this. So this really takes no time. So let me demonstrate this for you. Just watch, and then we'll do it together. This is what it looks like. That's all. It's actually a little hard for me to come back and talk to you after that because this produces a very pleasant state of consciousness that I'd like to remain in. I think you'll find that as well. So let's try that together. Put your tongue in that yogic position, back straight if you're seated. Let all the air out through your mouth, making a whoosh sound. Close your mouth in through your nose. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Again, close in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. In. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. One more. In. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And now just breathe normally. The first time you do this, you may feel a little lightheaded, but that will pass with practice. If you do this regularly, I think you will discover that this is a wonderful experience. And I'd like you to do this week just once a day. So you're going to be doing your breath observation 5 minutes a day, and then you're also going to be doing this breathing exercise. It takes no time, very good benefits. Let's go on to week 6. Your project for this week is to bring the concept of healing more into your life. There are many ways you can go about this. One that I'd like you to begin with is just thinking of your own healing experiences in recent years. You can make a list of things you've recovered from. Injuries, whether minor or major, illnesses, whether minor or major. Just try to remember those experiences. That's a way of increasing your sense of your body's own healing capacities. Another thing that you can do is to talk to your friends and acquaintances about their experiences of healing. It's very interesting to seek out stories of healing, to hear other people's experiences. You can read about healing experiences as well. I think the more that you bring this into your consciousness, the more you can increase the experience of healing in your own life. And I think as a society, the more that we bring the focus of our attention onto healing, we can actually increase its frequency. So this is I really want you to work with this concept. It begins with having the concept in place that the body can heal itself if given a chance, that we have a healing system that's always there waiting to work for you. So that's what I'd like you to do this week. Remember, you're doing all the things you did in previous weeks. You're adding on to this. So I'd like you to take a steam bath or a sauna twice this week. I want you to continue eating your broccoli at least twice a week. You should be eating fish twice a week, or flax. You should be eating soybean products in place of, I would say, at least 2 previous meals where you have eaten animal foods. So you're building, remember, step by step. And with the walking as well, let's increase that to 35 minutes every day this week if you can. A good brisk walk. Try to make time for it. Very important. And remember to stretch as well. In the mental spiritual realm, I'd like you to extend your news fast to 4 days this week. That's pretty major now. That means more than half of the week you're not letting news into your consciousness. Now remember, I don't want you to be uninformed. You know, if anything is really important, you'll find out about it. What I want you to discover is that you have choice as to how much of this you let in. Because in a way, this is kind of nutrition on the mental level. You know, that we, just as the foods we eat influence the way our body develops, so what we let into our consciousness really influences our mental state. And I want you in this practice of news fasting just to discover that there's choice here, that you can decide how much of this you want in your life. Another project that I'd like you to do this week is to visit an art museum or go to some favorite piece of art or sculpture. You know, I think that being in the presence of great art and beauty raises spiritual energy. That's why I had you buy flowers. And by the way, why don't you buy some more flowers for yourself this week? You know, it's good to be around them. It's an interesting practice to do. Please remember to continue your breathing. I'd like you to do this every day this week. That is, you're doing the breath observation, and in addition, you're doing those 4 breath cycles of that relaxing breath. Do it every day. If you want a convenient time to do it is as you're falling asleep at night. And by the way, it'll help you fall back to sleep if you have difficulties maintaining sleep throughout the evening. Let's move on to week 7. Your project this week is to think about some kind of service work that you could do this week. And that might be as simple as helping somebody who's shut in do some chores or buy groceries for them. You could also check out doing some volunteer work at a hospital or some kind of other organization. Now, the reason for this is asking you to begin thinking about putting the interests of others ahead of yourself. I think this is an interesting spiritual exercise to do. It promotes a sense that all of us are connected. That really other people are the same as yourself and have the same needs and fears and desires. It's a way of bringing that experience into your life. So doing some kind of service work is very useful. Continue all the other things of the program. Take, if you can, a steam bath or a sauna 3 times this week. I think you'll find it very pleasant. Continue your meals of fish and soy. Have generous amounts of fruits and vegetables in your diet, being careful of the ones that I told you are most heavily contaminated and trying to get organic products wherever possible. Eat plenty of whole grain products. Eat your ginger, eat your garlic. Let's increase the walk to 40 minutes this week, every day if you can. Very useful to do. Swing your arms when you walk, get your breathing and heart rate up. Very useful. Remember to do the stretching. And in the mental spiritual realm, the project that I'd like you to do this week is to reach out to someone that you've been estranged from. That is someone who was a friend who you were closely connected to in the past, and see if you can reestablish that connection. I think connectivity is a major source of good health. Frequently when I interview patients, the diagnosis that I write down after talking to them is disconnection syndrome. And I find that many people express in bodily complaints their sense of not having adequate connection. You can connect to pets, you can connect to nature, but connecting to other people, of course, is all important. So see if you can heal some relationship in your life this week. And by doing so, this is another aspect of healing that you can bring in to your own experience. Try to make more time for flowers in your life, for music that you like, also which raises spiritual energy. And this time with the breathing work, I'd like you to increase it to 8 cycles, 8 breath cycles this time with that relaxing breath. And that's all we're going to do. If you stick with 8 breath cycles of that relaxing breath, you're going to experience wonderful benefits from that. Welcome to week 8. This is the last week of the 8-week program. And the main project I have for you this week is to review the changes you've made in the past weeks and to think about how you're going to make these an ongoing part of your life. I mean, this is the real challenge now that you've done this, is to figure out how to continue this. How can you do this? Can you maintain these dietary changes? Maybe you want to modify some of them. It's up to you to figure out how to do this, but you've done these gradually enough, you've built them slowly, that there's a real potential here for making these permanent changes in your life. I certainly want you to continue taking the antioxidant formula that we talked about. I'd also like you to think about experimenting with one of the tonics that you've done some homework on. And if you try a tonic, one of the mushrooms or ginseng, for example, you want to give it a good 2-month trial. And at the end of 2 months, see if you can notice any differences in your energy level, in your exercise capacity. Just see what you find there, and then you can decide whether that's something you want to go on using. For exercise, you should really have reached your goal now of 45 minutes a day of walking, and I want you to do this at least 5 days a week. If you can do an hour a day, great. If you can do it 7 days a week, great. But if you can do 45 minutes of brisk walking 5 days a week, that will satisfy all of your body's needs for physical exercise. It will condition your cardiovascular system, it will keep your musculoskeletal system in good working order, and as I said, this will something that will hold up for the rest of your life. Very good thing to do. For mental spiritual activities, your main job is to continue this breathing technique. I want you to do the 8 breaths twice a day. I do it when I get up in the morning before I meditate. I do it in the evening when I'm falling asleep. Any time of day that you can do this, great. If you will do this breathing exercise, I promise you that at the end of several months, you will notice remarkable improvements in your health. This will harmonize nervous energies in your body. It will increase immunity. It will improve your digestion. It will improve your cardiovascular function. It will improve your outlook. It will calm your emotional states. It has everything to recommend it and takes very little time. So please, please do this. Now, in this last week of the program, I want you to try news fasting for a full 7 days. And this is an example of what I mean about thinking about how to make this an ongoing part of your life. I don't expect that you'll never listen to news again for the rest of your life. But once you've experienced a whole week of not having news in your consciousness, I think you can then decide consciously how much you want to let back in. And that's up to you to decide. I just want you to discover that you have choice here in doing this. There's another little spiritual exercise I'd like you to do this week. That's to think about the actions of people who've made you angry and see if you can understand why they did that. See if you can understand the behavior or motivations of people who may have hurt you, who've made you angry. Again, this is a spiritual exercise, a way of understanding our common experience and discovering that we're all connected. Just a useful thing to do, something that can promote healing in the realm of relationships. And I'd really like you to reward yourself with flowers at the end of the program. Buy yourself some especially beautiful flowers and put them somewhere where you can really enjoy them. I mean, that's your reward for doing this. And while you're at it, why don't you buy flowers for somebody else as well? I think that would be a good thing to do. So, you have now arrived at the end of this program. Congratulations. And it's up to you to figure out how to continue this for the rest of your life. But really, you have now laid the foundation for a healthy lifestyle, a lifestyle that will enhance and protect your body's ability to heal itself. It will give you the energy you need to do what you want with your life. It will reduce your dependence on doctors and medicine. It will make you happier and healthier as individuals, and ultimately, I think the more people that do this, the healthier we will be as a society. Thank you.